Gossip is the reason you're alive. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration, literally. Your ancestors exchanged information constantly. Who was reliable? Who couldn't be trusted? Who had lied about the food cache? Who had abandoned someone when it mattered? That information was the operating system of every surviving human group for 300,000 years. Groups that shared it thrived. Groups that kept information private were outcompeted by the ones who talked. You've been told gossip is a small thing, a petty habit, something to feel guilty about. The evidence says something completely different. There's a modern equation we've all absorbed. Gossip is bad. People who gossip are shallow. Talking about other people behind their backs is a character flaw. And yet, 65% of all human conversation is gossip, not a minority behavior, not a bad habit some people have. The default mode of human speech. Every culture studied, every language, every social class, 65%. That number doesn't come from somewhere scandalous. It comes from peer-reviewed research. The question is why? Why would language, humanity's most complex tool, spend 2/3 of its time on talking about other people? The answer reaches back to before language existed. Primates manage social bonds through physical grooming. Chimpanzees, bonobos, baboons. They spend up to 20% of their waking hours picking through each other's fur. Not because they're dirty, because touch is how they maintain trust, resolve conflict, and signal alliance. The physical grooming is not random. Animals groom upward, toward higher-ranking individuals, to build favor. They groom sideways, between allies, to signal loyalty. Each touch is a transaction. Each session says, I am with you. I am not a threat. You can count on me when it matters. A chimpanzee group can manage roughly 50 individuals this way. Beyond 50, there isn't enough time to physically groom everyone. The group fractures. Your ancestors needed to manage something much larger. They needed a way to maintain 50+ individual relationships simultaneously, without using their hands. While hunting, while carrying children, while doing everything else survival required. They found one. In 1996, Robin Dunbar at Oxford University published a book. Its title was Grooming, Gossip, and the Evolution of Language. His argument, supported by decades of additional research since, was this. Language did not evolve to coordinate tool use, not to plan hunts, not to pass down technical knowledge. Language evolved because groups needed a way to groom each other without using their hands. Gossip is vocal grooming. Before you hear the words, you notice the lean. Two people, voices dropping lower. Something in the quality of the conversation that makes you know, before anyone tells you, that information is moving. Information that matters. You feel it as a pull, the specific social gravity of being near something you're not supposed to hear. That pull is 300,000 years old. Dunbar's research identified what is now called the Dunbar number, 150. The maximum size of a stable human social group, the number of people a human brain can actually track, model, and hold in sustained relationship. Monkeys need physical contact to manage 50. Humans manage 150 through language alone. The mechanism is gossip. Knowing who is reliable, who is generous, who owes a debt, who has done something the group won't tolerate. Shared through conversation, accumulated across interactions, maintained constantly. That's not shallow. That's infrastructure. You'd think the most complex tool in evolutionary history was built for logic, for reasoning, for science, for argument. It wasn't. It was built for this. But here's what nobody asks. What happened to the groups that stopped gossiping? Not groups that had less gossip. Groups where information about people stayed private. Where no one said anything. Where social failures went unaddressed. Where the person stealing food was never named out loud. We have evidence. Groups where reputational information wasn't shared were vulnerable in specific ways. Free riders went unchecked. Individuals who took resources without contributing. Dangerous people went unwarned. Trust was assumed rather than calibrated. When it broke suddenly. Researchers studying hunter-gatherer societies across Africa, the Amazon, and the Arctic have found that gossip functions as enforcement. Not law, not punishment, not hierarchy, just information moving. The person who hunted alone and didn't share, the person who abandoned someone in danger, the person who lied about what they found. These behaviors became known. Quickly. Without a formal system. The reputational consequence arrived before any official sanction could. The groups that survived were the ones who talked. Specifically, who talked about each other. Who built what researchers call reputational tracking. The constant, low-level awareness of who in the group was doing what. Think about the last person you stopped trusting. You probably didn't catch them in a single dramatic moment. You heard something. From someone who heard something. The reputation traveled before the evidence did. And that's exactly how it was supposed to work. You have a map in your head right now of who you trust and who you don't. You didn't build it from data sheets. You built it from conversations. From what people told you, in low voices, when it mattered. That map is the same technology your ancestors used to decide who to shelter with, who to share food with, who to warn their children about. It kept working. For 300,000 years it kept working. You're in a lunchroom, or an office corridor, or a group message thread. Someone says something with a slight drop in their voice. You lean in before you've decided to. Before you know what they're going to say. Something happens in your attention. It narrows. Everything around the conversation becomes background. The rest of the room goes quiet even though nothing in the room changed. The lean is automatic. The attention sharpens before permission is given. That's not nosiness. That's the reputational tracking system activating. The oldest part of your social intelligence, doing exactly what it was built to do. What it's tracking now is a colleague's behavior, or a friend's relationship, or something that happened at a party you didn't attend. What it used to track was who had stolen food, who had abandoned their post, who had betrayed an alliance that everyone's survival depended on. Same system. Same pull. The information has changed. The urgency hasn't. Think about what it actually feels like to be excluded from information. Not just left out of a conversation. Specifically, knowing that people around you are sharing something you're not being told. That the information is moving through the group and you're on the outside of it. There's a physical quality to that feeling. Something tighter than embarrassment. Something older than anxiety. A low alertness. A sense that the room has shifted slightly, and you don't know which way. That response is not about hurt feelings. It's the nervous system registering a social threat. Being outside the information loop was dangerous. The person everyone was talking about and not warning was the person who didn't see the betrayal coming. Being inside the loop meant you knew who was trustworthy before you had to bet your life on it. It meant you had time to adjust, to ally differently, to see what was coming. The physical discomfort of being excluded is old. It was calibrated by a world where missing that information had real consequences. The person inside the loop survived. Gossip doesn't happen because people are small. It happens because information about people is the most important information there is. It always has been. The people who paid attention to it, who gathered it, shared it, and updated their understanding of who could be trusted. Those were the people who knew when to stay and when to leave. Who to eat with, who to defend, whose warning to take seriously at 3 a.m. when everyone else was asleep. They survived, and they had children who were just as interested in what people were saying about each other. The next time you catch yourself leaning in a hallway, in a message thread, in any room where voices go low, you're not being petty. You're running the most successful social software in evolutionary history. Language gave your species something no other animal had. The ability to maintain trust at scale, to coordinate across 150 people without needing to touch every single one, to warn each other, advise each other, hold each other accountable, all through sound. And almost all of that happened through gossip. The original purpose of language was not to describe the world. It was to describe each other, to keep track of who everyone was and what they were capable of.